Трасса уже открыта на Симферополе, но все равно масштабы колоссальные. А здесь как будто машины упали, скатились.
It's August and time for another summer stunt by Vladimir Putin. This year, Russia's Action Man president took a plunge deep beneath the Black Sea. Officially, this ride was to examine an ancient shipwreck. But on the comms up above was Russia's Prime Minister. In Crimea today, everything is political. Mr. Putin surfaced a little later in Sevastopol. Ukraine's president has condemned his visit, insisting that Crimea's future lies with Kiev.
Позвольте для BBC вопрос.
But when I put that to Vladimir Putin, he was unequivocal.
The future of Crimea was determined by the people who live on this land. They voted to be united with Russia. That's it. Full stop.
These Putin fans definitely agree. But they've been living under Western sanctions for over a year now as a consequence.
Vladimir Putin's presenting this as just another working visit, but of course it's so much more than that. This is about showing that Crimea, as far as he's concerned, is part of Russia for good now, and that despite all the sanctions for the past year, he thinks it's going to stay that way.
A sharp deterioration in the weather in the form of thunderstorms and downpours occurred on Friday evening in the southeastern Crimea, in the area of Sudak, Feodosia, and Koktebel. As a result of a severe thunderstorm, the power supply was disrupted. There were interruptions in the work of cellular communication. Several dozen vehicles damaged due to mud flow descended on the highway near the town of Sudak in Crimea. Putin angers Ukraine with visit to Russia annexed Crimea. Russian President Vladimir Putin on August 18 visited the city of Sevastopol in Crimea, triggering an angry rebuke from Kiev, which accused him of disregarding international law by traveling to the Ukrainian peninsula seized by Moscow 3 years ago. The trip is at least the 9th visit by Putin to Crimea since it was annexed by Russia in March 2014. Both the United States and the European Union have hit Moscow with several waves of sanctions over the land grab and Russia's backing of separatists in eastern Ukraine. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry denounced Putin's visit in an August 18 statement, condemning it as a gross violation of Ukraine's state sovereignty and territorial integrity. In March 2014, the UN General Assembly passed a resolution declaring that the Russian-orchestrated referendum on Crimea's secession from Ukraine was invalid and urging the international community not to recognize any alteration of the status of the peninsula. Here is why Ukrainian forces gave up Crimea without a fight, and NATO is alert.
Does give up Crimea without a fight in 2014? And how does it relate to why NATO is alert to Russia's actions now in Eastern Europe? The career of Sergei Yeliseyev helps to explain both. He was number 2 in the Ukrainian Navy when Russia seized Crimea, only to defect when put to the test. He was awarded a new job for it, Deputy Chief of Russia's Baltic Fleet. It didn't come as a surprise to those who once served alongside him.
When he took an oath of allegiance to Ukraine, these were empty words for him. He was always pro-Russian.
It illustrates the divided loyalties that some personnel in countries that once belonged to the Soviet Union might still face. Yeliseyev was just one of many to defect, and almost all Ukrainian forces in Crimea failed to resist. Russia's tactics weren't the only reason. Ukraine's military had suffered years of neglect, there was a power vacuum in Kiev, and many Crimean residents felt more affinity with Moscow.
Ukraine is not some distant land. It is right in Europe here. We got Ukraine here, and just a reminder, these countries neighboring Europe, they're all NATO allies. Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania. In fact, all these countries in green are NATO countries. And just look at the distances. You know, Kiev to Frankfurt, it's only a couple hours flight. Kiev down to Rome, a couple hours, a little longer to London. This is not some distant land. To have this kind of division, violent division right in the middle of Europe, causes instability. It's a real worry to all these countries and to the US because we're so close to them. Why does Russia care? Let's look at this next map. We've heard a lot about Sevastopol. This is the Black Sea fleet for the Russians. It's their only warm water port. All their ports up here in wintertime, often not accessible. And this one here is so key because it gives them access to the Mediterranean and then out to the Atlantic here. And this is the key national security for interest, really, when it comes to Ukraine and Crimea. And that's why when those 6,000 troops first moved into the Crimea, this is where they went first, right around Sevastopol. And it shows this is a key issue. It's not just for the West, certainly for Russia.
The whole country of Ukraine is pretty divided right now, and I want you to explain to our viewers how that unfolds.
No question. You can see it right here in the map. Here is eastern Ukraine bordering Russia. These are the percentages of ethnic Russians speaking. Here, 75% speak Russian, ethnic Russian. Here, 75%. Here, all over 50%. Once you get into the western part of Ukraine, bordering, remember these NATO allies here, here, and here. We're looking at only 5% ethnic Russian up here in the western parts of Ukraine, and that is also reflected in the pull between East and West. Many people here feel the pull towards Russia, deep cultural, historic ties, language ties. Many here feel the pull towards the EU and the West, and we've seen that reflected in their elections as well. In 2010, when voters went to the polls, this part of the country voted for the pro-Russian candidate, Viktor Yanukovych. This part of the country voted for the pro-European candidate, Yulia Tymoshenko, who until a week ago was in prison.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said yesterday that if Ukraine used force against its own people, that would be a grave crime that would incur unspecified consequences.
Why did you soften the GOP platform on Ukraine?
I wasn't involved in that. Honestly, I was not involved. Yeah, I was not involved in that. I'd like to, I'd have to take a look at it, but I was not involved.
Do you know what they did?
They softened it, I heard, but I was not involved.
They took away the part of the platform calling for provision of lethal weapons to Ukraine to defend themselves. Why is that a good idea?
Look, you know, I have my own ideas. He's not going into Ukraine, okay? Just so you understand. He's not going to go into Ukraine. You can mark it down, you can put it down, you can take it anywhere you want.
He's already there, isn't he?
Okay. Well, he's there in a certain way, but I'm not there. You have Obama there. And frankly, that whole part of the world is a mess under Obama, with all the strength that you're talking about and all of the power of NATO and all of this. In the meantime, he's going away. He takes Crimea. He's sort of, I mean...
But you said you might recognize that.
I'm going to take a look at it. But, you know, the people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia than where they were. And you have to look at that also. Now, that was under, just so you understand, that was done under Obama's administration. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, it's a mess. And that's under the Obama's administration with his strong ties to NATO. So with all of these strong ties to NATO, Ukraine is a mess. Crimea has been taken. Don't blame Donald Trump for that.
You said
and we'll do better, and yet we'll have a better relationship with Russia. And having a good relationship, maybe, and having a good relationship with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Manufacturing. And now it's the stronghold of pro-Russian protests here.
Вы вот видели украинское телевидение, да? А что об нас говорят? Мы похожи. Совсем разные вещи.
На террористов мы похожи, вот. 3 террориста. А вот это если надо будет, мы будем ними. Дело в том, что если надо будет, мы станем ними.
Everyone I've ever talked to in Kiev and Maidan is convinced that everybody here is completely brainwashed. Everyone that I speak to here is convinced that everyone in Kiev is totally brainwashed.
Хотя бы автономию, да, как бы, да, за это я согласна, но то, что в Россию Путину мы не нужны.
We just been invited to Victoria's house for some tea. And this is a family of farmers, so Victoria and Gennady, and they're farmers here.
Мы не из-за того, что мы там за Россию или там мы хотим за отделение. Вопрос в том, чтобы люди жили при любом правительстве, пусть это будет правительство, оно будет нормальное.
Чтобы они могли высказать свое мнение, его услышали.
Его же не слышат.
Ну, нас до Киева никто не услышит.
Нас просто не слышат.
I asked again, do you want to be part of Russia or do you want to be part of Ukraine? And again, I says it's a wrong question. We just want order.
Надо сначала навести порядок. Ну, если я фермер, я покупаю дистопливо 15-30, которое стоило 8 гривен. Оно в 2 раза поднялось, это на 100% все подорожало. Пришла вот эта новая власть. Она ж просто не владеет ситуацией. Вот что обидно.
Спасибо. Vika's mother and brother have just arrived. So Zina, Vika's mom, she actually received, she has a Russian passport. She lives on this side, but has a Russian passport, gets her pension there, and she says that her pension is 4 times bigger than the one she would have in Ukraine. But she says don't advertise that too much because they're going to call me a separatist, and that's the last thing I need. I'm almost 70. Oleg wants to show me some videos that he says are making him and people here really, really angry. This is, he says, what we are seeing on Russian TV. And this family is really interesting because unlike most people that we talk to at demonstrations, pro-Russian demonstrations in Donetsk and Lugansk, they watch Ukrainian television as well as Russian TV, and they say that they are making a very conscious choice and here to be with Russia, and here is why. Это школа, да?
Это школа киевская. Это дети.
Нормально разговаривай. Олег.
Тише.
They're shouting, hang the Russians, hang the Russians. So he says, and now, and you're telling me we're the separatists, we're the bad guys? How do you think that makes us feel? Олег, вот если Россия ведет войска.
Не ведет Россия войска.
Никогда в жизни.
Мы просим, Россия не может ввести войска.
Потому что сразу Америка предъявит аннексию.
Потому что Америка предъявит аннексию, чтобы не разразилась Третья мировая война
Мы на грани
из-за
Третьей
Украины.
мировой войны.
Меня рассмешили. Дай вам Бог здоровья, потому что уже конец рабочего дня, так, в принципе, уже спать пора. Поеду домой с хорошим настроением.